Actually, what we're going to talk about today is personal safety and security. And when I talked to Andrea, who invited me up, we sort of negotiated. I said, now, what do you want me to talk about? Because this is a subject that we could talk about all day. And I said, I'm going to try to put something in a box for you all in 15 minutes that typically we could talk about for an entire day. So what we agreed upon that I would talk about a little bit today is non-lethal personal security devices, which is a nice way of saying, if I choose not to shoot him, what else can I use? And that's what I want to talk about. And as Karen said, my background, obviously 10 years with the FBI, another 18 years as head of investigations for the Tennessee Valley Authority, where I was also a federal investigator. So while, I didn't spend all my career investigating personal crimes, I know a lot about it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what's available to you and some considerations that you should make as you travel locally, nationally, internationally, doing your business. How can you stay safe? And that's basically what I want to talk about. And here's the punchline. Years ago, when I was a school teacher, they said, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So here's what I'm telling you today. The most serious obstacle to your personal safety is complacency and fatalism, an attitude of fatalism. What does that mean? That means if you walk around saying, it can't happen to me, nothing's going to happen, you're setting yourself up potentially to be a good victim. Or if you walk around saying, it's not going to happen to me, it's going to happen to someone else. And if it happens, it was going to happen anyway. That's my wife's line, by the way.
Oh, really?
That's my wife's line. If it's going to happen anyway. Well, it happened anyway. The weekend following 9/11, someone broke into our house, stole my wife's car keys, and stole her car out of the garage while we were at home.
Well.
And I got up on Sunday morning and I said, Jan, did Elaine, our daughter, did she go to Sunday school this morning? She said, Elaine's not here. I said, well, your car's gone. And she jumped straight up out of the bed and we rushed downstairs, and lo and behold, someone broke into the house, stole the car keys from our favorite place by the back door, raised the garage door, and drove off with our car. The funny part about it is, I heard it all happen. And the reason I heard it all happen is because I was asleep on the sofa in the den, and I thought, well, it's one of the kids coming in, 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. The kid stole the car. He drove it around Knoxville for the better part of a month. And of course, the insurance company put us through all kinds of hoops. The first thing the guy said is, are you sure that this happened the way you said it did? Because it was so bizarre, nobody would ever believe it. Well, when the kid was finally caught, he was working the neighborhood. I was victim number 3 in our neighborhood. And that's another thing, get to know your neighbors. If I had talked to my neighbor, I would have known that the week before the kid tried to steal a Corvette up the street. Okay, this was vehicle number 3. The neighbor on the other street, he actually took the back window out of her car to get at some items that she left on the back seat of the car. He removed the window of the car and stole the items. So, the lesson there is get to know your neighbors. But it can happen to you. It really can. Now, I'm going to talk, as I said, about, don't take for granted that it won't happen. It'll always happen to the other person because it can't happen to you. The good news is serious crime in our country is down. It is down significantly since 1993. And I think it was during the 93, President Clinton, I guess, signed the big omnibus crime bill, and a part of that was more cops on the street and all that other good stuff. Serious crime is down. We're down to the fact in our country Serious crime only happens once every 35 seconds. What is the most common kind of personal assault, personal crime that occurs? The ones that are most general and happen most often are domestic violence. That's the biggest crime in our country today. The victim usually knows the attacker. Assault and battery. And the good news is most serious crimes generally happen. And I probably should have underlined the word serious. Most serious crimes usually happen after 8 p.m. Why do you think that is? Dark. And, you know, the later, it's really an interesting correlation. The later at night it gets, generally the more serious the crime is. You know, and my mom was right. Nothing good happens after midnight. That's true when you look at the crime statistics. Here are some unsettling crime statistics that might interest you. An aggravated assault, that means someone uses an instrument, even if it's their hands, to attack another person. That happens about every 36 seconds in our country. A forcible rape, about once every 5.6 minutes. Interesting statistic. 38% of the assaults and 60% of the rapes usually occur when someone breaks into your home. So where you think you're the safest. So the lesson here is your house not only is your castle, it also should be your fortress. You need to check your home security. And that's a whole different topic we could have talked about, tips to make your home safer. But the key to it is serious crimes usually happen when someone breaks into your home. The nice part about it is when the burglars come, they usually don't come when you're at home. Most home burglaries occur during the daytime. They also occur when the individual is not at home. By the way, the individual who broke into our home was an 18-year-old high school dropout. He and his friends were stealing cars for each other. They'd pick out cool cars, and they'd follow usually the woman home. They would case the neighborhood, and they'd come back at night and steal the car. Now, let's talk about self-defense weapons. How can you defend yourself? And I was going to ask this question. I think I'll go ahead. What's a gun? What's a gun used for? Well, yeah, probably. Well, hunting animals, shooting, self-defense. A gun is technically, in law enforcement parlance, called a lethal weapon. Okay? Now, that means, if you're going to use a gun, generally you intend to do some serious bodily harm. We're not talking about guns today, but I will say this. Guns are available. There is a law in the state of Tennessee that every citizen, once they undergo the firearm safety, the background check, and get a license through the Department of Safety, they can be licensed to carry a firearm. An FBI check, a law enforcement or TBI check. Yeah. Now, there's one thing you ought to consider, and my wife and I talked about this. She doesn't have one. Could you shoot someone? You need to make that decision before you get the license, because what happens many times is I got the gun, but I'm afraid to shoot, and while you're considering whether or not I'm going to shoot this bad guy, the bad guy knocks you down, takes the gun, and uses it on you. So before you decide, I'm going to go get my firearms permit, have a long talk with yourself. Could I take another person's life to defend me or someone that I love? Right. There are a lot of people who have the gun and they call it for self-defense. What they really mean is, if someone breaks in, I'm going to pull this gun on them and make them go away. Yeah, right. Consider the likely scenario before you go out and get the gun. Let's talk about then non-lethal. And I should say this is something else you need to know. They call them non-lethal weapons. The fact of the matter is, all these things, if you are the victim and this is your bad day, it could kill you. Pepper spray, for example, there are people who have died from pepper spray. There are people who have died from being stunned with a stun gun, for example. I doubt that anyone, I don't know of any cases where anyone's died from a personal alarm, but the other two, they can be lethal, but they are technically called non-lethal. That is, you're going to use it and it's going to buy me some time to get some distance. I'll tell you a funny story that happened with a friend of mine. She was an FBI agent. She had a purse about your size of yours, and she was carrying a .357 Magnum in her purse. She was on her way to the parking lot to her car late one evening. It was almost dark. It was in the wintertime. 3 guys approached her, and she said, it was clear to me they were going to mug me. What do you think she did? Nope. First thing she did, the human instinct, run to safety. Run to safety. She ran as hard as she could, thinking, I can get to the car. If I get into the car, I'll be okay. They knock her down, take her purse, and then nearly beat her to death. That's the gun story. Again, here we had an FBI agent who hadn't made up her mind that she could, in fact, use the firearm if she had to. Now, one of the decisions you have to make in deciding on a non-lethal weapon is, can you work up close? Do you do your best work up close, or do you want a standoff device? If you want a standoff device, I would recommend you consider mace, pepper spray, or tear gas. They're basically the same thing. The state of the art today, most people are selling and promoting what is called pepper spray. Pepper spray obviously comes in various forms. It looks like you can get it as small as the size of a lipstick tube, or you can get the larger version. In fact, my daughter, when she was 8 years old, she thought the pepper spray was lipstick. Oh. It's a lesson that she'll never forget. But basically, pepper spray or mace causes an excessive burning sensation and tearing, and I say it can cause death because your mucous membranes swell as a result of the active ingredient, and some people have actually died from suffocation. That'll teach them to bother you. It causes temporary blindness, and obviously it buys you some time while the person is disoriented to allow you to sleep. Now, the reason that they've gone to pepper spray instead of mace or tear gas is because a lot of studies have shown that people hopped up on drugs or alcohol, mace, and tear gas sometimes didn't affect them. They just kept coming. You kept squirting, you kept shooting, and they kept coming. But OC or pepper spray is much more effective. As I said, it's said to cause no permanent harm, yet it can cause some permanent harm. Pepper spray, what is it? It's oleoresin capsicum. That's the active ingredient, and it's basically made from the pepper. It's cayenne pepper, and it causes burning, swelling, tearing, the whole business. That was a photograph of a pepper spray canister. It's not a very good one. It doesn't show up real well. Now, if you're going to buy pepper spray, the 2 things you look for is the active ingredient, which is oleoresin capsicum, or OC, and you want somewhere between 15 and 18% OC. And you also want somewhere between 1 million and 3 million Scoville heat units. That's the how bad does it burn factor. Okay? So if you're shopping, that's what you want to consider. Now, question, can you carry pepper spray anywhere? No. Can't carry it on airplanes, obviously. Can't carry it in your luggage either. Please don't get caught with pepper spray in your luggage because the airlines get real upset. It could explode, and then you have just gassed everybody on the airplane. It is generally legal in all 50 states. However, some cities and states have restrictions on how strong the stuff can be. Where do you get it? If I were buying it, the first place I would try is a police supply agency. It's all over the internet, but if you were looking for it locally, I'd recommend the police supply agencies. They will sell it to you if you're 18 or older. And of course, check with your local attorney, state attorneys, about how strong it can be. Can I buy, for example, 18%? In some municipalities, 18% is reserved only for police officers. Stun guns and tasers are becoming even more popular. That's the old shock them until they can't move syndrome. And let me offer this one warning about stun guns. Some of them are pretty good, but some of them don't work through thick clothing. And when you shock him, the bad guy, all you're doing is making him angry. And he takes the stun gun and hits you over the head with it. So you need to know before you make your purchase, how effective is this thing? Does it work when you touch clothing? Will it work through clothing? Touching a person with the prongs, obviously, it's like, well, for lack of a better term, it's shocking them. It's giving them an electrical jolt, which basically paralyzes their nervous system temporarily, which again gives you the optimum opportunity to beat feet. Depending on where you live, you may have to get state certification to buy a stun gun. Basically, the only difference between a stun gun and a taser is the stun gun has the two probes and you stick it to them. The taser has a projectile and it shoots the wire. The wire hits you from across the room, and then you see them go into the spasms. That's a stun gun. Picture one made by a company called Stun Master. And you can see the two electrical probes, and you can see the little trigger there. You push it up against them, pull the trigger, and watch them shake like the cartoon characters. That's a smaller one that's made like a small flashlight that fits in the palm of your hand. Same principle. You stick them with the probe on the end, and it gives them a volt. By the way, it's 800,000 volts. Sounds like a lot. Actually, it's not the voltage that kills a person; it's the amperage. But you can really have a lot of voltage and still live. We talked about using it, and again, the warning: it requires you to be in close proximity. If you don't want to be in close proximity, don't waste your time on a stun gun. I'd buy mace personally, or OC, and I would look for either mist or fog. My preference is the mist because it doesn't blow back in your face like the fog will. The last thing you want to do is shoot someone with OC in the wind. You're standing downwind, and you become the victim. There are a lot of cities and states where stun guns are restricted or illegal. There's just a partial listing. But I'd recommend, if you're considering something like this, call your state attorney general or your local DA or the local sheriff's office, and they can tell you if it's legal in your municipality. Last thing I want to talk about is personal alarms. Personal alarms is just a device. They come in all shapes and sizes. Most of them look like small iPods. You either punch a button or pull the ring. It's kind of like what's on your keychain of your car, and it makes an unusually loud, piercing sound, which can be startling to a person standing in close proximity, which again buys you time to run to safety. There's again an example. This one on the left looks like kind of an MP3 player. Well, actually both of them do. This one is built to wear on your wrist. A lot of people who are joggers prefer the alarms. And of course, the best alarm and the cheapest alarm you can purchase is just the regular everyday whistle. You'd be surprised how effective those are. That's another picture. The best advice I can give is avoid becoming a victim. And there's a lot of literature on the internet, believe it or not, about how to avoid becoming a victim. Make good choices. Don't carry yourself as a victim. I saw a situation occur in Chattanooga a year and a half ago, and I am a proponent of the state, our state, making the use of cell phones illegal while you're driving. Here's a good example of why. This lady this was in Chattanooga, she pulled into the mall parking lot and she was yakking it up really good Nothing against ladies and cell phones, but she was yakking it up really good. She nearly hit the guy who ended up being the person who stole her purse. And she never saw it. She wheels in. The guy's walking across the lot. She nearly hits him, and I guess it probably made him angry. She parks. She throws the door open. She's sitting there talking. You know, the young guy comes around. As soon as she gets out of the car, he grabs her purse and takes off. And she's standing there screaming. You know, she never saw him. When asked what did he look like, she didn't have a clue. She didn't have a clue, you know. And fortunately, I was able to give him the description and where he went and the whole bit. But the point was, she never saw him because she was more concerned about, you know, the conversation. The other thing I would suggest is avoid flash and what I call bling. You know, depending on the situation, you may want to underdress rather than overdress. In fact, that's one of the first advices you get nowadays if you're traveling overseas in foreign countries is don't look like an American. Don't wear blue jeans, believe it or not. Most folks in foreign countries don't wear blue jeans. And then generally stay aware of your surroundings. That's the short version, you know, of this. Like I said, I had 15 minutes to do this. And I apologize for not getting into a greater detail, but if you have questions, I'd be certainly happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Do you think that that you were saying that the violent crimes have gone down since '93? Do you think because of the economy and gas? Do you think it'll...
I do. In fact, I think there is a relationship, there will soon become a relationship between the price of gasoline and the crime rate in some areas. We're already seeing it. I don't know about you guys in upper East Tennessee, but in Knoxville, you know, it's probably not going to be long before we go back to locking gas gaps. You know, folks are and the other big crime is folks waiting till you go to buy gasoline and they steal your debit card. You know.
I just heard on NPR yesterday that Chicago has the highest gas rate right now, and that the lockable gasoline caps have soared.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
That's the biggest seller right now.
I want someone to tell me this, and I apologize if you work for an oil company, but I got to ask this question. Last quarter, the oil companies in this country made $14 billion in profit. If they made $14 billion in profit, why is gasoline so high?